If I had asked you, say 5 years ago, to tell me how you saw the orthodontic profession, if you were to look back on it 5 years later, I'll bet you there's a lot you wouldn't have seen. Maybe 3D printing becoming commonplace, maybe clear aligners becoming a big part of how we practice, maybe DSOs, and who would have ever seen at-home aligner companies as being a part of our future? There are some people who see these things clear as day. And my guest today has been saying things for a while that has caught people by surprise, but not until later on when it happens, and then they call her correct. So as I tell you every week, buckle up or get on the treadmill or grab that drink, because today you do not want to miss my time with Heather Hopkins. So today we have a very special guest, Heather Hopkins, Dr. Heather Hopkins. So say hello, Dr. Hopkins.
Well, hello. Thank you very much for having me today, Glenn. I really appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. Now, I can tell you right now, she is arguably one of the most patient human beings on the planet. Because if you knew the technical difficulties we've had trying to make this happen completely on my end, she has shown her true colors to be an amazing human being. So thank you. Thank you for your patience, Heather.
I mean, I have 2 toddlers, so it's kind of, it just goes with my day-to-day life, Patience is very important.
I appreciate it. And I promise not to mess up my room too bad today. Make a mess everywhere and spill juice all over the sink and counter and what have you.
As long as you don't just start screaming no, we're in good shape.
No, I will not scream no. So let's start like I do with every one of these episodes. And let's find out a little bit more about you and kind of like where you went to school, where you grew up, a little bit about your life, and how you ended up to where you are right now.
Okay. Well, yeah. So I went to the University of Kentucky for dental school, and the University of Louisville for my residency. My husband is an orthopedic surgeon, and he is a few years older than me. So once I finished my training at Louisville, we moved out to Los Angeles for him to do his training. So I had pretty unique experience when I was out there. And once he finished up his training, LA is very cool. We really enjoy live music. It's kind of, we don't go to dinner, we don't go to movies, we go to live music. So it's kind of our thing. So we saw lots of cool shows, went to all the national parks, but we had an 800 square foot apartment that cost as much as our 4-bedroom home with a pool in South Carolina. So we decided to relocate to the Southeast. And so I am in Columbia, South Carolina, and I am in a multi-specialty practice. So I have partners. I have pedo and GP partners, and we are all equal owners in the practice. And that is something that I have very, very strong opinions on the future of our profession, some of the changes that are happening, some things that you can do to kind of help, insulate your practice against some of those changes, at least for the time being, especially having watched medicine and the medical model. I think that our model's not too far behind that. So that's kind of how I've ended up where I am currently in my personal and my professional life.
Beautiful. Well, let's dive right in because you mentioned you have very strong opinions on the future of our profession. Mind sharing those a little bit?
No, not at all. And so I'll warn you that people don't always tend to love to hear me talk about this.
I'm going to tell you now, I love to hear you talk about it. I can't wait to hear you talk about it.
Okay. So it's something I've been talking about for a while. And, for a while, people kind of laughed at me when I would talk about it. And then sometimes people, now get a little angry about it. And then now it feels like I get a lot of messages and phone calls and requests for kind of advice on how to kind of emulate the model that I currently have, or how did I know to do this? So
the angrier people are at what you say, the more likely it is that you're correct.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know how correct I am, but people definitely tend to get a little upset, a little worked up over it. But so in my personal opinion, I think that the average orthodontic office that has 1 to 3 locations with one doctor is something that is going to start to disappear over time. You look at medicine, my husband's employed by a hospital. How many independent solo medical practitioners do you see that have private practice all on their own? Not that many anymore. And they usually have a pretty boutique model.
Right.
And and so, a lot of them have formed super groups, they work for hospitals, or like I said, they have a boutique. And so in my opinion, I think that the dental world is going to follow orthodontics in particular. And I think that you can go big, you can have a lot of locations, and you can either have partners or you can have a lot of associates, underneath you. You can, have a DSO, because that's going to, help your buying power. It's going to, help you get your supplies at a lower cost. It's going to help you in marketing. You're going to have bigger brands, more awareness. So I think that's one model that you can go with. I think that you can go boutique, and boutique definitely does not mean small. Boutique means that you have a niche. Like, there's something you are known for, whether it's just the fact that you are, right next door to the largest school system in the area and people can walk to your office. It just means that there's something you have that is unique that nobody else has. And then I think that you can go multi-specialty, which is the way that I went. Or I think you're going to end up working for somebody else. So it's, you can go big, you can go boutique, you can go multi-specialty, or as I said, you can go corporate, which means working under somebody else. And so I think that is the way that our profession is headed in general. People don't like to hear me say that, because the majority of us currently are in that 1 to 3, practice, single doctor ownership model. But even if you look at the information that Delta Dental has, that Patterson Dental has, that Henry Schein has, what they're looking at, and, they are big companies and they make a lot of money, and what trends are happening in our industry are going to determine how much money they continue to make in the future. So they spend a lot of time looking at this, and all of their data has shown that middle portion of right now, what is 80% of orthodontic offices, is going to start to shrink, and that the majority of them are going to go to DSO models, where it's, I said, a lot of orthodontists combine to create kind of a super group, or the people are going to end up being bought up by, private equity groups, or end up working under a corporate umbrella.
It's definitely an interesting concept. I'll be the first to admit I don't know enough to know enough. I certainly keep my eyes open and see certainly the shifting landscape of how we practice right now. And you're right about the medical model. It's rare to find any physician, short of maybe a primary care doctor, who doesn't work associated with a hospital. And so, many have felt that perhaps that's a function of privileges at hospitals, but it could also be a function of, economics. And, one way or another, we're going to know over the next 10 or 20 years what's going to happen. And I think we live in interesting times, right? Because there aren't just the shifts of the practice model like you're referring to. There's a shifts of the actual delivery of care model, meaning, plastic versus braces, right? Mm-hmm. Traditional braces versus lingual braces, right? There's some pushes on out there to go to lingual as a differentiating factor for our practices. So it's really interesting to see. I think in the last 5 to 7 years, we've seen more changes from every direction in orthodontics, from practice style to delivery of care, than maybe the 50 to 75 years before that. And, I believe that there is kind of a Moore's Law effect here. And for those out there who don't know Moore's Law, it was essentially related to computing power doubling every 18 months. And I'm seeing, it seems like every 12 to 24 months, something dramatic is happening that's changing the way we look at our profession, right? Because do you do any 3D printing in your practice right now, Heather?
I do.
Right. If I had asked you 3 years ago, are you going to be doing 3D printing in your practice? You probably wouldn't, unless you were really an early adopter.
Well, no. So that's what I would say is I'm an early adopter. And so I have been doing different, lecturing for various companies and consulting for about 5 years now. And I very distinctly remember 5 years ago giving a lecture and saying that within 5 to 7 years, I thought that the majority of orthodontists would have a 3D printer in their office. And people laughed at that idea. They didn't think, they couldn't wrap their heads around that. And so I like technology. I do think a lot about, talk to my husband about this. Is it just part of getting older that you feel like technology is advancing so quickly? Does every generation feel this way that, wow, there's been exponential changes in technology and it's hard to keep up? Or are we truly at a point in time where technology is changing so rapidly that it's just changing every facet of our lives in really big ways? And so, I don't know, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think you're an early adopter. I think you're a pioneer, right? Because, in a technology adoption curve, before early adopters come pioneers, right? You have your pioneers and then your early adopters, et cetera, and it moves on to your laggards at the end and what have you. And I think anybody who would say 5 years ago that in 5 years everybody's going to have a printer, it's really almost like a prescient comment. Nobody was saying that 5 years ago. You were.
They were not. Trust me. People thought it was, yes, I got a lot of laughs. Even if I said that's when I started making my transition over into multi-specialty practice, and people were shocked. They were like, you have 3 locations, you're doing very well. Like, why would you sell that? Why in the world would you want to go into, be tied down to pediatric doctors? I tried to have the conversation of, well, what are you going to do when the pediatric doctors by you bring in an ortho associate?
Right.
What's going to happen?
But that per se is not a new model, right? The orthopedo thing's been around for ages. And in my neighborhood where I practice, there isn't one pediatric dentist that hasn't had an ortho in-house since the day I got there. So I've been working against that model for 5 years, 4.5 years since I got there. But going back to your original comment, anybody who said 5 years ago that we were going to have, every house would have a 3D printer is remarkable. Now, I think the statistics would bear out that the overwhelming majority of ortho practices do not have a 3D printer yet. But the concept is, like, it's an everyday conversation for all of us is, hey, what resin are you using? Or, what are you using to wash your models afterwards? Like, those weren't comments that were being had 3, 4, 5 years ago. And, I had a conversation once with Joe Hogan from Align and other upper management at Align. And I made it clear to them, I said, at least in my opinion, they took what was a true hobbyist concept of 3D printing in the ortho office, because nobody was doing it. The concept was there. But when they said we no longer accept iTero scan, anything but an iTero scan, they immediately launched 3D printing from a hobbyist concept into, whoa, I have a 3-shape scanner or a 3M scanner, and I now need to figure out how to do aligners. And you know what? If I can't submit to you, then I have to come up with my own way of doing this. And then that sort of drove innovation to come up with, like, there's a niche here. Let's come up with new ways to develop printers. Let's come up with new types of resins. Let's come up with new softwares to allow tooth movement. And all of a sudden, what was a cottage industry became a real mainstream market that then drove consumers to look at it and go, whoa, now we've got an alternative to the big gargantuan empire of, aligners. And all of a sudden, the conversation shifted beyond that into, well, I'm going to be completely Invisalign free by XYZ date, and I'm going to do all in-house aligners, which, whether or not one agrees with it, was all started by the iTero issue, right? Because
I don't know that is that was definitely a catalyst. I think that there was a series of missteps that Align has made that have pushed people that direction. I think that was a big catalyst. I think that if you take a step back, one of the things that really impresses me and amazes me with Align, and one of the reasons that I do use their product in my office, is that think about in 1997, they started using 3D printing.
Right.
They knew what 3D printing was. Like, I remember going through my certification when I was in residency and asking what all the little lines in the aligner meant, and no one could give me an answer. And they were just like, oh, it's part of the manufacturing. I mean, now we know that was stereolithography printing, right? And it's gotten significantly better. And, Align is the largest utilizer of 3D printing in the entire world, like the whole world. Think about that. Every industry in the whole world, Align's like we're the largest utilizer of 3D printing. And so I think that is impressive. And I do think that, yes, they've made a lot of very, poor decisions in their communication and in their marketing that have pushed people more towards 3D printing in-house. I think that 3D printing in-house for retainers and going impressionless was kind of the first movement with the 3D printers. And I think that to this day is the number one way to kind of become more profitable and streamline things in your practice and help with marketing in your practice. I do in-house aligners. I've used ULab, I've used Archform. It's clunky, it's a process and it's not quite there. There are people who have devoted a lot of time to getting it to a point where they feel like they are more profitable that way. But I do think that there are advantages to the software with Align that you do not get from in-house aligners yet. And so there's the workarounds of those of us who have been using aligners for, 10, 12 years. We had workarounds for a long time. And some of that has now been built into the software. And so it's kind of like going back to doing Invisalign in the early days of having to really think through every step and spend a lot of time building out what you want your setup to look like and what's involved with that. So is it impossible to be profitable with in-house aligners at this point in time? No, it is not. Do I think it can replace every role that Invisalign plays in my practice at this point in time and have me still be profitable? I don't. But that doesn't mean I don't think it's going to get there, right? I think that is going to progress and that is going to continue to change. One of the predictions that I had made years ago was that eventually Align would lease us the software and sell us the plastic.
And I've asked them to do that.
Yeah.
I said to them a while ago, I said, guys, see the writing on the wall. Your strength is not as a printer and, manufacturer. It's your user interface that's the name of the game. And if you could allow people to use your ClinCheck and then develop an in-the-box, straight, you want to do in-house aligners? Here it is. Here's your printer, here's your resin, here's your plastic, and here's your user interface. Go for it. But I don't think they're quick to embrace that model.
No, I don't think so either. It's not to say that it will never happen. But one of the things that I've learned is that the reason that they are the largest utilizer of 3D printing in the world is that a lot of their patents that they have were on how to scale 3D printing. Because it's not easy. It's not easy to scale the 3D printing and be that profitable. They do 400,000 custom medical devices a day. So just think about that, like that they 3D print 400,000, models in a day is kind of mind blowing. And to, in my practice, again, like that's something that we've really been working on. We are impressionless at this point in time. We do 3D print for all of our retainers. We scan for all appliances and we do in-house aligners as well. It's, like I said, it's a different workflow. And it's just not to the point where I can treat the types of cases that I treat with my, with Invisalign aligners and get the same outcomes in the same amount of time, with the same predictability. Again, I'm hoping it gets there one day, right? Like that'd be nice if it does, but the software is definitely not there yet for in-house.
Yeah, I agree. And and not to get too sidetracked on this, but I'm always thrilled to go wherever the conversation takes us. You're a KOL for Invisalign, right? You speak on their behalf, which to me means nothing than just saying you're a KOL, because as you and I have discussed, and every KOL I personally know has discussed, you make a whole lot more money and a lot less trouble in your life when you're not a KOL. But so at this point, people either believe or don't believe, and I won't even get into that big discussion about it. But I just want to say, just for transparency's sake, you're a KOL. I am not, but I'm a Diamond Plus provider for Align right now. So we're doing, over 400 aligners cases a year. But like yourself, I'm also in-house aligners. A lot of my braces cases, I debond them, just towards the end where I have some small in and outs to do, and I'll finish it with in-house aligners. I just want to remind you of something. The Orthopreneur Summit is the #1 orthodontic meeting in the world. Yep, you guys have told me that. Now, if you're not signed up for September's summit in Orlando, you have no idea what you're missing. Of course, you're going to get practice and life-changing information from some of the industry and outside the industry's best speakers. But that's where it just begins, because most meetings should give you decent information, right? It's the combination of the education combined with getting together all your friends in an environment that we set up that we like to call social CE. It's an opportunity to not only get amazing CE, but to do it with the most remarkable social time you're going to have at any orthodontic meeting, or any meeting for that matter, ever. The things we have planned for you, I'll just throw out a couple for you. House of Blues, Friday night. We took over the whole House of Blues, and we have some amazing stuff in store for you there. And Andretti Indoor Racing. Sounds just like indoor go-karts, right? No. DJ, party, a million more things to do there. I'm telling you, this is the meeting I told you last year that everybody will be talking about for the rest of the year. This year is going to be even better. So go to opsummit2023.com, sign up now. I promise you, you will love it. How can I guarantee it? If you come to that meeting and after the first day is not one of the best meetings you've ever been to and it lets you down, you find me, you tell me, I will pay for your limo back to the airport, I will pay for your flight home, and I will refund the money you paid to come to the meeting. Come on, you got nothing to lose, and I promise you, you'll love it. And by the way, we're over 80% sold out. And it's 6 months from now. So please sign up now, opsummit2023.com, and I will see you there.
If you look at ULabs right now, about 80% of the utilization of ULabs is people finishing their braces cases.
Yeah. I know this is a very polarizing discussion, but in my hands, and I can't speak for anybody else out there, including my partner, Doug Shaw, in my hands, as I get really close to a finish, I can finish faster with plastic than I can braces. So I can finish them in 2 or 3 aligners and get it picture perfect. When an outbend here, a Z bend there, which I love doing, it doesn't happen overnight. And I just feel like I get better control of those really, really fine movements when I do it with plastic.
So here's the difference. It's not plastic per se, it's customized treatment. And that's where in the past 2 years, my practice had always been like 20 to 30% aligners. It brought people in the door. It was a differentiator. I like doing them. I don't think that aligners are a differentiator anymore. I don't think, having that Invisalign logo on your website is going to drive tons of patients into your office. Everybody has that. And the biggest change that I've made in my practice in the past 2 years is really kind of embracing and understanding the benefits of having customized treatment. And that's what, when you get down to, how many detailing appointments do you do? Most people do. Yes.
Currently?
Yeah.
Currently, very few. Very few. I at the very end, if you want to call detailing plastic, which technically it is detailing, right? But
Mm-hmm.
if you're talking about how many wire bending detailing appointments I do, I won't do more than 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. Because if I need that step up or step down or Z bend or out bend, and it doesn't look really good at the following appointment, but my occlusion is a class 1 and everything else looks really good, I'm getting those braces off and I'm putting them into plastic, where I can do essentially 15 or 20 bends in the mouth, so to speak, virtually with plastic.
That's what I'm saying. And just think about the biggest time, the thing that eats up the most time in your day. What is it? It's customizing brackets and wires to your patient's mouth. We are the specialist. And, right now is a big thing with direct consumer. Every dentist is doing aligners or 6-month smiles. We're the specialist. We should be providing completely customized treatment to our patients. They deserve that. That's what they come to our offices for. But that's what takes the time in our clinical day. How much time does your assistant spend standing next to the chair, waiting for you to come over and repo a bracket or place a bend?
Yeah.
That's the majority of the time in the clinic, right? Is that we put the same, for the most part, some people have variable torque, Damon Systems, big on variable torque, there's high and low torque for different case types. But for the most part, we put the same brackets and wires in every patient. And in order to customize that to your patient's mouth, you go over and you put a lot of bends in, you're putting torque, you're doing this, you're doing that. And again, I believe that we should be doing that. And, but that's what eats up the majority of our day. And that's where, when, the higher volume your practice becomes, the harder it is to see those things and, to miss those things, or easier it is to miss those things. And I don't want that. I want excellent outcomes for my patients. I am not willing to sacrifice the quality of my outcomes in order to increase the volume in my practice. So what does that look like? How do you increase your volume but maintain the quality of your outcomes? And there's different ways to do it, but one of the ways to do that is to have customized treatment, whether it's with, custom IDV brackets or whether it's with aligners. It is making sure that each patient has like a custom prescription in their mouth. I mean, what prescription do you use for all of your Invisalign patients?
Right, exactly. There is no prescription per se.
There
At least
isn't.
for me, there isn't. Right? It's like a trick question.
It's
So
whatever the patient needs, right?
exactly.
You just build it out.
You have you have a low torque here. You have a high torque here. And it's exactly what you're saying. I never thought about it that way, and it's a brilliant way of looking at it. And the truth is, up until very recently, and even still currently, there is a lot of blowback from people who may not do a lot of aligners and say, well, I get a better outcome with brackets. And you know what? That's wonderful if that's what they do. In my hands, and again, I'm referring to me personally, I've done, 4.5 years of ortho now. I'm by no means a master. I will never say to anybody that that's my strength to orthodontics, is that I'm the master clinician showing everybody how to do it. And I will tell you that one of the things I've noticed that slows my cases down is that bracket position for me is very challenging. I do my best, but, I want things perfect when they're done. And what that means is that, I moved to indirect bonding, but not the digital indirect bonding. I moved to, hands-on indirect bonding, which I think also has less accuracy than the digital, but the digital is still working itself out a little bit. And I just haven't gotten comfortable. I've used it. I like the Sandy method, the double tray, and it's worked well, and it's shortened treatment time and given me better outcomes. But when I go aligners, like you said, I have a customized prescription for every single tooth, and assuming I get compliance and I use the proper attachments and understand the things I've learned from their master's courses or their online webinars or from Jonathan and Maz in their amazing aligner fellowship, or watching Scott Fry do his stuff, which is totally different in many respects. If you do what you've been taught, it works. And you often can get a straighter, faster line than using aligners. But, we could go on here all day like plastic versus metal, right? But I do agree with you that nobody can argue that if you said 5 years ago where we'd be with 3D printers, you were alone. Nobody saw that. And going back to the original conversation is, if I put you into a room with, let's just say, 5 of what we would all agree are like the most forward-thinking individuals in orthodontics today, and said to you, where will we be in 5 years with DSOs? Where will we be in 5 years with 3D printing? Where will we be in 5 years with in-office aligner systems? Where will we be in 5 years of plastic versus metal? I think we'd all have answers. And I think many of them would be way off because things are evolving so quickly right now. And the only thing that I see getting in the way of that is an economic slowdown in the general economy. Because a lot of people have never practiced in an economic slowdown. They came out of school after 2008 and didn't know what it was like to have a really humming practice that all of a sudden sort of went south after, the recession of 2008 and so on. And when that happens, companies slow down and needs slow down. And I'll be curious to see, because it's going to come. We don't know when. We don't know how bad it's going to be, but it's going to come. And when it does, companies are going to draw back a little bit. And I'll be curious to see how that impacts it. But you've already said about on the DSO model kind of where you stand. And I think you're dead on. I don't necessarily have the wherewithal to disagree, but there's no reason for me not to agree. It makes sense. And we'll come back to that in just a minute, if that's okay with you.
Yeah. And the one thing I want to say is that I feel like I get a lot of questions now about what's the answer? What's this like magical mystery answer of how to survive this period? And there is no one answer. That's different for everyone. And there are multiple models that will survive. All braces models, I think that those definitely will still survive. All plastic models, yeah, I do. I think there are multiple ways to go about it. The most important thing is just to be aware of your surroundings and not what the guy down the street's doing. Like everyone loves that, the Michael Phelps, meme where the guy's looking at him while he's swimming. Not that. Like I've never been one to worry about like what the guy next door is doing, but just as an industry as a whole, like what changes are happening, what's going on, with direct consumer and what's going on with consumer, you're talking about like an economic slowdown. That's very important to be paying attention to these days is what's happening with consumer patterns. I know that consumers is kind of a dirty word, according to some orthodontists at this point in time. I don't either, but I've heard some people get pretty upset about, referring to our patients as consumers. And the way I view it is, I've done a lot of reading about it. I'm a biochemistry and molecular biology major, hardcore science whole way through, not a lot of business classes, 0 business classes. But I do try to educate myself and read a lot about it. And I came across an article in Forbes with the CEO of Kaiser Permanente, where they were talking about how the difference between a consumer and a patient is if someone has appendicitis and they have to go to have surgery for their appendicitis emergently, they are a patient. They're going to go wherever, the ambulance or wherever, whoever takes them in that moment to have that issue addressed, they are a patient. If someone's told they have crooked teeth and that they need braces, no one's ever really needed braces or aligners in an emergency situation, right? So they have time to shop. They have time to go online and be a consumer. They have time to pull out their smartphone. They have time to go to their mommy blogs, to their Facebook groups. They have time because they don't really feel this like emergency of I have to go get care. So therefore I have to go where I'm told immediately. Yep. And so that's where, they have that consumers are going to be shopping and looking. And once they come into our office, then yes, they're our patient and they should be treated as such. But, I don't know if you see it in your area, but, a lot of people get second and third opinions. And that's because people have access to information. They can very easily Google, orthodontics, braces, aligners, whatever term it is they look for. I want straight teeth. And they can read about it and they can read reviews. As I said, go to their mom groups and their blogs. And so that's where I think, as far as you're talking about like the economy and changes with that, I think that's where it's going to be really important to be aware of how people are finding us and why it is they choose to come to our office over someone else's office.
Yeah. And, I've had a campaign going for a while in my area. I've been trying to convince people that appendicitis is directly related to crooked teeth. So that way they are always patients. They've got it
here. This is the place.
Quickly, I need orthostat. But you make some amazing points there, Heather. And like I said, I feel bad that like we haven't gotten to know each other because I love the way you think. Because I've written about a lot of the things you've just covered. In that, number one, we need to run our own race, and I wrote about that in my blog probably 2 years ago called the Purple Velvet Suit Syndrome. And if anybody wants to go to orthopreneurs.com and go look it up, just type in purple and you'll see it. And it was a whole long story that made me one day look and go, I got to be who I am. I can't go watch, there are people in our profession, and you, as I get to know you better, you may be one of them. But there are people in our profession who are one-off. You can't duplicate them. Cole Johnson, for instance.
Exactly.
I've been to Cole's practice. I've watched him for the day. There is one Cole Johnson. And if I tried to run my practice like Cole runs his, it would be a nightmare, right?
It would fail. It would not work.
Or even if I made it work, I'd have to work 10 times harder to get the same result because he is authentically Cole Johnson. And if you go to Maz Mashiri, right? If you go to his practice, and I've been there, radically different. Like totally different, amazing practice. But if I tried to run my practice like him, I'd fail miserably again. So the first takeaway for me is you have to be true to who you are. Don't try to be somebody else. Don't just start implementing aligners because, Heather said they're the greatest thing or Glenn said they're the greatest thing. It has to be right. And in many instances, the old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. When you're ready for that next evolution, you'll know it. And, you have to actively be seeking out new ways and better modalities to treat your patients. But, I evolved from one thing to another. You evolve from one thing to another. And we all jump on that technology adoption curve at a different stage. Although Sean Carlson has been showing in the last couple of years the shark fin technology adoption curve, in that things come on much quicker nowadays and they disappear much faster nowadays than they were years ago, which again brings me back to the sort of how fast things were evolving. And one need only look at, say, Fortnite as a great example, right? Wasn't it like 7-8 months ago that every single person on earth was like glued to Fortnite? And like every single practice had a Fortnite dance going with the kids, right? Like, where did that go?
The things I do that my husband looks at me like I'm crazy. He's like, why do you care about that? I'm like, you don't understand. Okay. I have to do marketing in my practice.
Right. But they come and they go as quickly as they leave as quickly as they came. And so I love the comments you made. Be authentically you. Don't try to be something else. Always be out there looking for the next great thing and be willing to sort of at least give it a shot and visit with it, if you will. I love your ideas about the mommy blogs and having to be out there. And again, I think we each have the ability to have a very successful practice. I would go one step further and add one more little point to the whole thing. And that is, we are in business. We want to think of ourselves as healthcare providers. And like you said, you've always been into science. And I love scientifically driven things as long as the science is valid. And I think oftentimes the papers that we cite as the Holy Grail are not necessarily as valid as we make them out to be. Bench studies are a different story. Molecular biology, that is science. Like that is when you do something at a bench with a microscope or whatever you're doing or an assay, there's no issues as long as you control for what's there. You're going to have a pure science. When you deal with
we work with people,
right, exactly.
People are unpredictable.
Exactly. And biology is unpredictable. And we had a class in ortho residency for one semester, for one term, where we took every landmark article in ortho. And I use landmark with air quotes. And we sat down and put it through true scientific scrutiny. And none of them held up. None of them. They were good. They're good guides, if you will, but they're not Bible, right? And we can't hold on to them and say, well, I see some of this silly discussions online about, well, the study says this. Well, that doesn't have enough studies. Let's lighten up a little bit and realize that we're not going to kill anybody with ortho. We've been turning out great results. And if my lower anteriors are proclined an extra 7 degrees, it doesn't mean they're not going to get a job and they're going to lose their house and they're going to lose their teeth and we've doomed them for the rest of their life. It's like from the movie.
My lower incisors are at 113 degrees. So, I have to say, I still feel like I'm doing okay in life.
I think you're doing great. Maybe we could do a study, lower incisor proclination as sort of its correlation to success in life. Right? Yeah. Maybe we find that proclining lower anteriors actually leads to greater success. I'm totally kidding. People out there, don't get angry at me. We're gonna like have our houses torched at this point, right?
Oh my gosh, every person is different, and that's the thing, and that's what I always talk about is that we're the specialist, so we have to, have no treatment. We can't have a blanket treatment plan for every patient, right? It's our job to look at every patient individually and determine what's best for them, and the answer is not the same for every patient,
right?
And the message you were talking about I love that you talked about like with Cole Johnson, because I get a lot of, younger orthodontists that, want to come shadow me or that will send me stuff saying, hey, I went to this place and they said this, and what do you think? And at the end of the day, you have to be true to yourself and you have to know what makes you tick.
Right.
All right. You have to have some self-awareness and you have to, number one, what do you want your practice culture to be?
Exactly.
My practice culture isn't going to be the same as a lot of other people's because, they're not me. And you have to be self-aware and you have to know your strengths and your weaknesses.
Exactly.
I have an amazing team around me and they make up for my weaknesses. I really don't like having to call patients back on the phone and explain certain things. And so I have great people who can, I can explain what I want to say and they can do that for me, just as a small example. But, know what you're good at, know what you're not good at, and then have people on your team who help like fill those gaps. And then, I said, like, be true to yourself when determining your practice culture. Don't try and have the same practice culture as, you mentioned like Cole or Maz or whatever, if that's not who you are, because you're going to be miserable. Yeah. Like, you're going to be pretending to be someone else all day long, and people are going to see through it, and you're still not going to be happy. And so I think that's really, really important. And a lot of orthodontists tend to lose sight of that. They get caught up with like keeping up with the Joneses. Not everyone wants a really big practice. Not everyone needs that. Like, different people are motivated by different things. And I think it's a journey. And it's not the easiest one always to take a step back and say, what am I good at? What am I not good at? What motivates me? Like, what makes me tick? And what do I really need to be happy in life? Yep. And that's different for everybody. And so, whether that means that you have a practice that starts 100 patients a year, or whether it's one that starts 1,000 patients a year, or whatever that is in your life, like, determine that and don't get too caught up with, the Facebook groups and the blogs and like everything else is trying to keep up with other people or emulate other people if that's not who you are.
Amen. I agree 100%. Yeah. And, what really helped me a ton are two things. And I just had a conversation with it yesterday with a friend of mine who's a neuropsychologist. For me, it was mindfulness and vulnerability, right? So we're predominantly in our profession drivers, right? Like, if you put, if you like at this, in 2 weeks, we have the Orthopreneur Summit, right? And we have like a 6 a.m. Camp Gladiator every morning, because I'm into the whole mind, body, wellness kind of thing. So if we're going to do a meeting, let's have a lot of other cool stuff at it to sort of feed everything. So we've got like a Camp Gladiator and goat yoga, like it's 6 a.m. or something.
Goat yoga.
Oh, it's awesome. Goat yoga. You haven't lived until
I've heard a lot about that one. I haven't tried that one yet.
You haven't lived, Heather, until you've had a goat in diapers crawl up your back, in downward dog, which is like, so maybe 2020 will get you to do goat yoga.
Okay.
But my point is, it's 6 a.m. and you'll get 75 to 100 people running out on a thing, killing each other at Camp Gladiator. And we're type A's. We do CrossFit. We do triathlons, right?
Mm-hmm.
We play guitar.
Marathon runner.
Right. Or you swim 20 miles, or you wrestle sharks for a living, or it's something weird or strange like that, or you speak 8 languages, or an Eagle Scout, or black belt, whatever it may be. And I'm no different. And I learned that if I tried to power my way through everything in life, I was going to either explode or implode, or I was going to alienate the people around me. And germane to your point is vulnerability and mindfulness, taking the time to stop and think about where you are in this world, doing some affirmations that make you a better person, not a better orthodontist, but a better person to be around, and a vulnerability to ask for help, or a vulnerability to ask others, hey, Heather, I know we've been friends for 5 years and I really respect you, and I'm really trying to work on myself and become a better person and a better clinician. And I'm not going to respond to this email I'm sending you, but would you mind telling me the 3 things that you think are my strengths and the 3 things that you think are my weaknesses that I need to work on, right? And I'm asking you to be as honest as you can, because that will make our friendship better. I promise. Yeah. And how many people are I did that 3 years ago, and it was tough. And I took an Excel spreadsheet out and I collated.
It's hard. It is really hard looking at, trying to figure out what role you have in mistakes that have been made in your life, or, what your weaknesses are. It's not an easy thing, but there's definitely a big payoff once you're aware of what those things are.
Yeah, and you have to have the vulnerability to ask people and accept what they say without saying, oh yeah, but. And I learned about the things in my life that were keeping me from being more successful. And I'm just thankful I had friends who were honest enough. And I knew they were honest because I saw the same thing coming up with examples. hey, Glenn, I think you're blank because you remember these 3 examples in the last 20 years we know each other, that you did this, which tells me my friends were thinking about that. They knew that about me. And that was keeping our friendships from being as good as they could. And so I've really tried to focus on that. And that goes back to your point of what kind of practice do you want to have? Because you're not going to fit a square peg into a round hole. So learn who you are, learn what your strengths are, double down on those to create your practice culture, and then use what you're weak in to sort of fill in the mortar of the bricks you're building. And in my practice, I tell my patients, everybody tells my patients, hey, I just want to let you know, Dr. Krieger is really serious about your orthodontic outcome, but everything else is going to be fun. And so if you call my office and you get put on hold, you'll hear the message is me telling dad jokes. That's it. It's me. It's me saying, hey, what do you call a fake noodle? An impasta, right? And people die laughing. They think it's the funniest thing they ever heard. I have a goofy music in the background, and people love it. And here's the real kicker. People will say to me, well, what if you don't want to just treat kids? Hey, news clip. My practice is 43% adults. And why do I not care? Because it's who I am. It's not who I'm going to attract people who are adults who want to have a good time and have a doctor who's going to joke and have fun and knowing he's fully serious about his ortho. But if you go into it saying, well, if I tell funny jokes, the dad jokes online, well, I'm just going to get kids because they're going to think, oh, these are for kids. No, be yourself, be authentic, be silly, be funny, be serious, be outgoing, be introvert. But whatever you do, make sure your team, like you said, complements who you are and creates the entire big picture, right?
Which means that you have to be aware of what your weaknesses are and what areas that you need someone to kind of fill in those gaps, right? Like you have to understand that, this is something I'm not great at. So this is where I'm going to hire someone who can, be part of my team who fills in those gaps for me.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so,
and I think that, again, that is definitely the key to success. I know, like, I did listen to like a few of your podcasts because I am, an OCD overachiever.
Nice.
I like to do my homework.
Hi, my name is Heather, and I'm an overachiever. Welcome, Heather.
I know that people like talk about like the books, and I love to read. And one of the books that I really, I think this had a big impact on me is Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me. I don't know if you've read that one or not.
I have not. I'm going to get that. Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me.
It talks about confirmation bias and all the games that we play like with ourselves to make mistakes that we made somehow not our fault.
Right. Did you hear that? That study that they asked people, are you a good driver, a bad driver, an above average driver? And 80% of people call themselves above average drivers, right? Which is like, you can't have 80% be above average, right? But to your point, exactly.
Yeah. And so it just talks about like how difficult it is and how we are actually wired, like just for self-preservation almost, that when bad things happen and things go wrong, our brains automatically kick into this like safety mode of like, oh, well, it's okay. Like it wasn't really your fault. Like it's not, you weren't really involved in this. There's all these other factors that were at play as to why things, didn't turn out the way that you wanted. And so sitting down and like looking at, where you are in life, how you got there, things that maybe aren't the way you want them to be, and what you can do to change that, or what role you even maybe had, to make them to factor into where you are now, is not the easiest thing to do. But like I said, once you can do that, like I think it's amazing. You send out emails and ask. Like I love that. Like first thing I always do is I ask people, like I don't ever ask like what they liked or what I did well. My first thing is, what can I improve on? Right. I know that I can improve, so what could I improve on? And I see a lot of stuff from other orthos and in the groups and everything about failure, and people are, so-and-so failed or they're afraid to fail. And in my opinion, the only way that you really fail is when you refuse to acknowledge you made a mistake. Amen. And you just keep going in the same direction. Sure. Because you're not willing to stop and be like, you know what? Maybe this isn't the best move for my practice or my life. Maybe I do want to change course. And so the only way to truly fail is if you just keep going, even when you know it's not working.
Yeah. I agree. And so I recently posted on hanging on to loser employees too long. And I don't mean loser like they're a loser in life, but I mean people who don't fit our office culture. And it's a bad word, and I apologize for using it. But, we hang on to people for way too long because we're afraid of the pain that it's going to cause us to let those people go. And I will tell you, being in Cole's practice for the day, he is the master of that. But then again, he's Cole Johnson. He can, he can look someone in the eye and go, you know what? You're really just not a good fit for our practice. And I'm going to make some phone calls and see about finding you another job. But today's your last day. And for some, that is the most terrifying conversation they're going to have in their lifetime. And you're right. It just to grow can be painful. And it goes back to the two words I'll throw out again, which are mindfulness and vulnerability. And my podcast with Jeannie Moody was so good because she talked about vulnerability. And for those out you who haven't heard it, go back and listen to it, because her life circumstances basically forced her into having to be very vulnerable. And like many of us, a driver, really killing it in life, doing awesome, but life circumstances that she opened up about caused her to be vulnerable. And I learned so much from her and talking to her about that it changed the way my practice runs. And I thank Jeannie, if you're out there, I thank you every day for the vulnerability you've brought into my life. So thank you. And so mindfulness and vulnerability, if there's a takeaway from your message, it would be just like, be yourself and grow in your own way, right?
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I have an amazing team. We haven't really talked anything about like my digital workflow. I've built out a pretty thorough digital workflow system in my office. And a lot of that's delegated to my team, and they are awesome and they get it done. And people ask me a lot why my team works so hard for me and like, what did I do to motivate them to do that? And number one is the fact that like, I know, again, like who I am and I know what my strengths and weaknesses are. So when I hire people, I look for people who are going to be okay with my personality, who match my personality, and, fill in those gaps. I empower my employees. Like, I am willing to say that I'm not great at this. Here's my idea. Here's what my vision of what I see happening. And so here's what I'm able to provide you with to try and make that happen. And they take it and they run with it, and having those, everyone wants to feel like they're contributing and like they matter. And so my team, I might come up with an idea, but they're the ones who bring it to life, and make it happen on a day-to-day basis. And so I'm exceedingly thankful for that. But like you said, I have to show the vulnerability of like, hey, here's what I want, here's what I see, but I can't make this happen. Can you help me with this? And then when they can take ownership of something and it works and it works well, they're proud of that and it makes them want to do well. And so that is the best answer I have, because I get that a lot of how I've have a team that does so much for me and works so hard. Is that number one, they know that I work really hard. And number two, I let them take ownership of projects and really make them come to life to be what it needs to be for the office. And so that helps us all kind of function better as a team. And so, yes, I think Jeannie's podcast was great. And it is really important just to say like, hey, look, I can't do all this. Like, I need some help, and people want to help you.
They do. The right people.
They really do.
The right people want to help you. And like you, I'm developing my digital workflow, and I'm as removed from it as I possibly can. And I've given people the tools and the confidence to take on what they need to take on, so that I can step by a computer, look at something, go, yeah, that looks great, go. Or, you know what, let me tweak this just for a minute or two and make it work. And you need that when you're getting to, 400, 500 clean checks a year. You need that
100%.
When you're doing in-house aligner, because the systems you need to, what we're in the process of developing is an entire digital lab team. The same way people used to be proud of, I have an in-house lab tech. Well, that's great. But I don't need somebody in my office making me Hawleys. I can dish that out all day long. I need somebody in my office who's going to make sure that the moment they're scanned, everything follows the way it should into the Google spreadsheet or EasyRx or whatever you're using, that everything's based and labeled and printed and sucked down and packaged, and that it works the way it should because
Yeah, no, I love it. It's a paradigm shift.
Totally.
It's a paradigm shift. And that's where I think a lot of orthodontists, they're a little intimidated by that, maybe a little scared of that because they have a method that works, right? It's worked for them for however many years. It's worked for them and it's worked well. And it's hard to take a step back, especially in a busy practice and say, you know what, like I need to rethink my systems.
Exactly.
I need to rethink how I'm doing this. And even though it is, hard to do that, it's going to make your life so much less stressful moving forward.
Amen.
Because how many people, when someone wants braces and they call back to your office and they're like, hey, I decided I'm ready to get started. They go on the schedule, they show up, they sign a contract, they make a payment, they get their braces, off the shelf that day. Nothing has to happen in between. If somebody wants, digital IDB, aligners, in-house aligners, any other appliance, any other digital product that you took a scan for that is not physically in your office, that's a whole different set of steps that have to happen before they can show up in your chair. And I don't want to be involved with any of those steps. And so, that's what I've built out. And it takes time. And a lot of doctors, still take that responsibility on themselves. And that's what causes a lot of stress. Because if you look at someone who's taking on, a lot of aligners, and they're filling out the prescription themselves and they're submitting it themselves and, they're doing every change to all of it and they're making sure that the box shows up on time. That's a lot of homework and a lot of stress.
Yeah, too much. Can't do it.
Yeah. And so you have to take a step back and kind of just rethink your systems. And that's really important to do.
Yeah, and that brings us full circle because 5 years from now, that system is not going away. It's only going to get more pervasive in our life. And now's the time to start developing those systems and policies to make it more effective for when it does become a bigger part of our practices. So,
yes. Yeah. And the best time to make those changes is when you're not doing a lot of it. Exactly. It's much easier to start adding and then to when it becomes a large percentage of your practice.
Exactly. Well, the time has come for us, Heather, for those 10 questions.
Okay.
Are you ready?
All right. Okay. I don't know what these are because I
know
get through. So I don't like
for my OCD friend, this is terror. But think about it. This is mindfulness and vulnerability. This is like perfect.
Okay.
This is perfect. You ready?
All right.
So,
okay, let's do it.
What is the final electron receptor in the Krebs cycle? I'm totally kidding. I was saying oxygen, right? That was always that board question, but I'm kidding. You ready? You see, that loosens things up a little bit. So, question number 1. What is your favorite word?
Oh, my favorite word? My favorite word is amlodipine.
Amlodipine.
Yeah, it's it's just back from my biochemistry days. It is a type of medication that is I'm trying to remember, it's a calcium channel blocker, but I just thought that was the most fun word to say when I was memorizing all those new words. And so it's just kind of stuck with me of amlodipine.
Norvasc. That's Norvasc. It's used to treat high blood pressure. I love you, Heather, because you are such a geek like me. That is awesome. And what's your favorite word? Not love, peace, kindness. Amlodipine.
One that's fun to say.
Awesome. You have a 5-year-old and 3-year-old, you said? Yeah, yes. They're walking around the house going, amlodipine, amlodipine. So what is your least favorite word?
My least favorite word? I don't like to have to say the word, okay, I'm going to try to say it really slowly. Participation, because I always, I stutter when I say it. So if I try and say participation or what position do you play, those words hang me up a little bit and I stutter. And so I hate asking patients if they participated in something or what position they play.
Participate. I like that. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, emotionally?
I would say like doing something completely new, like just like a new project. Just gets me really excited. When we just moved over the summer, and so you're learning about all the stuff that goes into buying a house and real estate and all of that kind of stuff. I really love learning about new subjects, no matter what it is. I just really dive in, and I need to know everything I possibly can about it.
What turns you off?
Let's see I guess I would say when there's not a lot of flexibility in something. If someone's like, this is the way we do it, period. There's no like rule bending, no thinking outside the box, no other option at all, then I don't care for those types of situations, because I feel like there's always more than one way to get to the answer.
Now you're ready. Here's the big one. What's your favorite curse word?
One of the things that I like to say is kind of fun is that instead of saying something's ridiculous, you say it's ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a spell from Harry Potter.
Hey, it's one of my favorites. It's like, oh man, that's ridiculous.
What sound or noise do you love?
Mm-hmm. What sound or noise do I love? I love the sound of, so I actually just bought a house on the lake, and so I really love the sound of the water.
What sound or noise do you hate?
So I will tell you, I'm a pen clicker. I pop all the bubbles on the bubble wrap. So I make all the sounds that annoy everyone else. Let's put it that way.
So you hate silence.
I do. There you go.
See, that's my job as an interviewer, to find that one. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I think that I would like to be an educator. Like I said, I really like learning about new subjects. And I feel like my niche in that area is that just the way my brain works. I had a professor in residency that said he had a Pooh Bear brain. I very much have a Pooh Bear brain, but I can take things that are very complex and make them very simple, just because that's the only way that my Pooh Bear brain can understand them. So that's what I would like to do. What profession
would you not like to do?
Would I not like to do? I would not want to be a proctologist, that's for sure.
That's an easy one. That was an easy answer. And last but not least, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
This was not a mistake.
Beautiful. I love that. So I hope everybody out there has enjoyed their time with you as much as I've enjoyed my time with you. And I have such a profound respect for you after this hour together, because you really are a great thinker. I think you really are onto a couple of really great ideas. You've certainly made me pause and think a great deal about our profession and where we're headed, and a lot of other things. And I just hope that everybody else out there appreciates the resource you are to us as a profession. And I know you're going to be speaking at AAO next year, right? So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I know. I'm really excited.
I know you speak for a line, and you travel the country doing. And I know you'll be at the Mother of Pearls conference, right? You're speaking there. So people, you will have a great chance to hear Heather Hopkins dispense more amazing wisdom. Just keep your eyes open and follow her on Facebook and be her friend. And I just can't thank you enough. So,
yeah, but no, thank you for having me on. And again, I hope that people found some value. And today, like I said, I've made mistakes along the way, and I try and look back and reflect upon those. And so if I can ever help anyone avoid any of those, I'm always available.
That. And to everybody out there, until we meet again, best of luck. I'm always here for you, and just wishing you the absolute best. So thank you so much again, Heather, and just have a great day.